September 8th, 2025. Paris is burning, not metaphorically, literally. Water cannons, tear gas, 80,000 riot police deployed across France. The 5th Prime Minister in 2 years was just voted out. And here's what nobody's talking about. This was predictable years ago by people most of the world ignored. They didn't predict Italy will fall, not Greece, not Germany, not Belgium, but France, specifically France, because they knew something the rest of us missed. There is a reason why when African countries started cutting ties, economists in Lagos and Dakar weren't surprised. There is a reason commentators from Senegal to South Africa said almost casually, watch what happens to Paris now. They had done the math, they had followed the money, and what they found was a system so deeply wired into France's economy that when it got unblocked, well, you were watching it happen in real time. But here's what makes this different from every other government's collapse you have seen before. This didn't start with budget crisis, didn't start with protests. It started with a vote in 14 African countries with a currency most people have never heard of. And when those countries finally said enough, France realized it had built its entire house on sand. Let me show you how. 1945. France is rebuilding after World War II. The country is broke, its industries destroyed, its empire crumbling. So France does something clever, something its former colonies wouldn't fully understand. For another 75 years, it creates the CFA franc. Now, if you're hearing this for the first time, don't worry, that's by design. This is the kind of system that works best when nobody is looking too closely. Now, here's how it works. 14 African countries, Senegal, Mali, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, and others had to use this French-controlled currency. Not optional, mandatory. And here is the kicker. They had to deposit up to 50% of their foreign reserves in the French treasury. Did you get that? They had to deposit 50% of their foreign reserves in the French treasury. Half of their money in Paris under French control. You are running a business, but half your revenue has to sit in your competitor's bank account. And they decide your exchange rate, and they can devalue your currency whenever they want. That is what France set up, and it ran for 80 years. 80 years. Why didn't anyone stop it? Because the people who could have stopped it, African leaders, were often the same people who benefited from the arrangement, and the people who have been outraged, everyday Africans, didn't know until recently. But here is where it gets interesting. France wasn't just storing this money, they were using it, investing it, financing French companies, keeping French borrowing costs artificially low. Between 1970 and 2008 alone, over $850 billion flowed out of Francophone Africa through this system. Capital flight, under-invoicing, profit repatriation. Money that should have built schools and hospitals in Dakar was building portfolios in Paris. But the CFA franc was just the foundation. The real exploitation, that's where uranium enters the story. Let me give you some numbers that would make your blood boil. France paid peanuts for Niger's uranium. Niger's total revenue from all uranium sales, about 100 million euros per year. That's 5% of Niger's national budget. Now, watch what France did with that uranium. They converted it to nuclear energy, exported 103 terawatt hours of electricity across Europe just in a single year. The nuclear reactor and machinery exports, making $73.97 billion just in 1 year from uranium. Niger gets 100 million euros. France gets $73.97 billion. Let me say that again because it's important. Niger, 100 million euros. France, $73.97 billion. And this went on for decades. It went on for decades. Now here is the part that should really make you angry. I didn't just accept this quietly. They tried to negotiate. In 2014, Niger's president Mamadou Issoufou approached French officials and Areva executives. He said, "That's why I've asked to re-equilibrate the terms of the deal between Areva and Niger." You see, Niger wanted to raise uranium royalties from 5.5% to 12%. Still far from what they actually deserve, but closer at least to something fair. You know what France did? Reuters reported that French authorities portrayed the demands as unrealistic and unaffordable. They called it unrealistic. France was making billions, and when Niger asked for an extra 6.5% in royalties, French executives said it would not make their operations worthwhile. And then this big French energy company operating in Niger suddenly stopped production. Now they called it maintenance, but everyone knew what was going on. Pressure. As political pressure. Accept our terms or we shut it down. One source put it bluntly: France used to impose its price on Niger for uranium, and past requests for fairer deals were dismissed as dreaming by French officials. They called sovereign nations trying to get fair value from their natural resources dreamers. This happened in 2014 and again in 2015. Niger kept asking and France kept refusing. But something changed after 2023. French companies like Total Energies and Orano dominated not just uranium but oil, gold and mineral extractions across West Africa and Central Africa. And here's the trick: they pulled systematically. Say you extract 1,000 tons of uranium from Niger, but you only report 600 tons. So you pay taxes and royalties only on 600 tons, but you export and sell 1,000 tons. The remaining 400 tons is pure profits. It goes straight to shareholders in Paris. Investigative journalists in Chad and Niger started exposing these practices in the 2010s. Supply chain analysts confirmed it. The discrepancies were staggering. We are talking about billions in unpaid royalties, billions in hidden profits. And remember, when Niger asked politely to renegotiate, they were laughed at, told they were dreaming. So what happened when they stopped asking politely? But it gets even worse. Studies showed that for every dollar of foreign debt entering CFA countries, 60 cents immediately left as capital flow. Now think about that. Africa borrows money and most of it flows back to France through contracts, debt repayments and profit transfers. France could buy African resources below market price, then sell finished goods back to Africa 20 to 30% above global prices. Captive markets, no competition, maximum extraction. Now here is the part that should make you think. Germany is Europe's largest economy. It doesn't exploit African countries through currency manipulation or forced reserve deposits. It competes, it trades, it innovates. Germany doesn't control anyone's currency and it is thriving. France built its entire model on extraction, and when that model breaks, now something changed in the 2010s. Social media, smartphones, access to information, the new generation of Africans who weren't afraid to ask uncomfortable questions. Youth movements started organizing, not just protests, but coordinated campaigns. Hashtag Stop the CFA trended across West Africa. Activists like Kemi Seba burned the CFA frown note in Senegal on camera. He was arrested. Then when he was released, he burnt it again. And for the first time, African leaders started listening. 2019, Benin's president Patrice Talon makes a statement that changes everything. With regards to the vision of sovereignty and managing our own money, it's not good that this model continues. That was it. That was the signal. Within months, reforms were announced. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Senegal, one by one, they demanded French troops leave. They stopped depositing reserves in Paris. They renegotiated contracts. And France panicked. Now, here is what French officials understood that most observers didn't. France wasn't just losing influence in Africa. It was losing the financial infrastructure that had kept France solvent for decades. And some people saw it coming. Jackson Hinkle, December 2024. He said France would be a third world nation if it wasn't for Africa. In Sama think tank, April 2023, France should be a third world country. Cross-border talks, May 2024. Without exploiting African countries, France will not be a world power. Guardian Post, Cameroon. No France without Africa. At least 30 to 50 prominent experts make this exact prediction. Between 2000 and 2025, not France will struggle or France will face challenges, but they said France will collapse. Now ask yourself, why didn't anyone predict the same for Germany or Britain or the Netherlands? Because those countries built their economies on trade, innovation and competition. France built its economy on extraction, and extraction only works if the other side doesn't realize they have been extracted from. Well, they realized. Fast forward to September 2025, Prime Minister Francois Bayrou proposes a budget, 44 billion euros in cuts, freeze welfare payments, eliminate 2 public holidays, work more, earn less. The French public loses it. Parliament loses confidence. 364 to 194 is out. They block everything. Protest erupts. Over 80,000 police was deployed, hundreds arrested, roads blocked, buildings burned, and President Macron is scrambling to appoint another prime minister, the 5th in just 2 years. But here's what's really happening beneath the surface. France's public debt has surpassed 3 billion euros. That's over 110% of their GDP, an all-time high. The Atlantic Council reported France's borrowing costs are worse than Greece, a country that nearly went bankrupt a decade ago. And here's where it all connects. When Niger cut off uranium access in 2023, France's energy giants Orano posted a loss of 133 million euros in just the first half of 2025. French energy prices have jumped over 40% since 2022. Households are struggling, industries are hurting. The cheap uranium that powered 65% of France's electricity, gone. The $74 billion in energy and nuclear exports threatened. The invisible subsidy that kept France's economy humming for 8 years, cut off. Africa said no. When Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Senegal and Ivory Coast demanded troop withdrawals, ended currency deposits and shut down its economic contracts, France lost its economic lifeline. So what's the lesson here? Now, this is not just about France and Africa. It's about every system built on extraction, on exploitation, and on assumed compliance. Whether it's a currency system, a trade agreement, or even a relationship in your own life, if it only works when one side doesn't know they are being exploited, it's not sustainable. Eventually, people wake up. Eventually they access information, eventually they push back. And when they do, the entire system collapses. This generation of Africans didn't wait for permission. They didn't ask politely. They organized, they exposed, they demanded change, and they won. So here's my challenge for you. What other systems are running on the same logic right now? What other relationships, industry, or power structures are one awakening away from collapse? Think about your own country, your own region, the trade deals being signed, the partnerships being made. Who is really benefiting? Who is being told they are benefiting? And what happens when the truth comes out? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story isn't over. France is just the first domino, and the next one, it might surprise you even more.